What's up, little screamers? Welcome back to Scream in Style, where we talk all about horror and create a look from whatever said horror we are talking about. And on this video, I'm going to be doing something different. I've already reviewed one horror book and I've got my hands on another. I'm going to do a vlog on the new horror book that I just purchased at my local bookstore. It just opened up. It is super cute. It's on the square. Love it. I'm probably going to be spending a lot of my money there, a lot of my paychecks. Anyway, so I just bought Grady Hendrix, and it is How to Sell a Haunted House. And if you have read this, please in the comments below, tell me what you thought about it. Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Was it in the middle of the road? Tell me everything. I first heard about this book whenever I recently watched a video on YouTube, and this girl was going through so far of what she has read this year and her, are these books worth the hype? And this book is worth the hype. Apparently he is a fantastic writer. I'm not putting my expectations super high. I never want to do that, but I am putting my expectations at great writing and hopefully a wonderful story to tell. That is going to give me maybe the creepy crawlies, the heebie-jeebies, just something that will get my heart racing and make me feel something. And I am just ready to dive into something that isn't fantasy and isn't smut, bad written story smut. Don't get me wrong, I love smut, but I need good writing and storytelling too. I just, I need this. Please, Grady. I am begging you, please, please be good. Be good. I'm going to try to get to anywhere between 50 and 100 pages, and then I'll be back with my first round of thoughts on this book. So, without a further ado, here we go. All right, so 100 pages down, and I've got notes, but they're good notes. Right now, we are learning about our protagonist, Louise. We're learning about her childhood, her family. She has a little daughter, and this is the start of really focusing mainly on her relationship with her mother. And also, we're starting to get into the relationship of her brother, and her father comes into play too, but her main relationship focus right now is what she had with her mother. And so we find out about Louise, her childhood, and her brother calls, and her parents have died. Both her parents have died within a car crash, and so now she has to go back home to deal with it. And as she is going back home, this is where we start to notice that things are not right with her mother's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of puppets and dolls and oh, why? Of course it's dolls. And if you have been watching this channel, you know I do not like dolls. I've never liked dolls. I am a stuffy girl. I am not the old lover of vintage dolls, the porcelain, Raggedy Anns are okay, but to me, I think they're more of a stuffy than a doll. But no, I do not like dolls. There's just something about creating something that looks human, but there is nothing within that shell. It is empty, it is vacant, and to me, it's creepy in itself just to see a small, mini, empty human. If that makes sense. It's weird. It freaks me out. But anyway, she starts to notice things within the house of these dolls. So that is where we're at in the 100 pages. Now, so far, I am really enjoying Grady Hendrix's, here we go, words. Get them out. Enunciation, pronunciation. Let's do this. I'm really enjoying Grady Hendrix's writing style because one of the big things for me is he doesn't rely on similes and metaphors heavily in order to set and describe a scene. And that in itself is such a refreshing change. He's direct, to the point, and he paints a picture so well without having to use the flowery, purpley prose. And it's not that I don't like that style, I just am not in love with that type of prose. And I do like to see it, but sometimes it's just too much because honestly, it is hard to find an author who can write purple prose well and do it consistently without it developing into something ridiculous and over the top that just makes me cringe. And as well, it takes me out of the story. If I'm sitting there wondering about your purpley prose and why it doesn't make sense to me, it's not good. But his pacing for me so far is just right. And we're starting a slow build up here. It's not super slow. It's nice moderate. We're not going in it with guns blazing, wrecking ball. I think it's a nice pace and a nice startup to the buildup of what is going on within the house, what is going on within Louise's family. And I really like how Grady is showing what it's like to lose parents, what it's like to lose someone in general. I recently lost my grandfather, and seeing my mother go through the grieving process of losing now both her parents, it has mirrored what Louise is going through. Even for me, whenever there are. Why are you growling? There's nothing going on. You are fine. That is Bella. She loves to growl. She is an old, grumpy lady, even though she is two. Anyway, as I was saying, you're not gonna let me finish? Do you want screen time? Do you want to be a star? Well, it's not gonna happen right now. I'm your tits. This is her growling away. There, you got your screen time. You said hi. Are you happy now? Be satisfied. There are scenes that whenever Louise is going through the house, there are certain rooms she can't go into because it's too hard. And that is relatable to me, as that is how I felt whenever I went back to my grandparents' house whenever my grandmother died first. It was hard going back in there. And then the second time, whenever I lost my grandpa and my mom lost her father, now I think it's been 7 years later, it was the process all over again of just, it's hard going into their house because it just hurts too much. And that really resonated with me. There was one part that really made me choke up and almost shed a tear. I was very, very misty eyed. There's a scene where when Louise calls her parents' house to listen to the answering machine, hoping their death wasn't real and that they would pick up, or they would actually call her back and her brother was just playing this horrible, horrible prank on her. But of course he wasn't. Definitely needed some tissues for that. And speaking of the characters are being fleshed out pretty well. And all the characters in the book, they have pretty distinct voices. So there's no question of whenever somebody is talking, I know who that person is. There is no confusion. And speaking of Louise, so far I do like her. She's not annoying me. She's relatable. She's not being an idiot. She was the firstborn child, and she is responsible, ambitious, mature, very logical and practical kind of thinking. She's pretty much the ideal child that you would want. However, she is a control freak. And of course, she doesn't realize this throughout the book. Throughout the first 100 pages, she just can't understand why Mark was the favorite child. She never understood why her parents let Mark do anything and everything, let him run all over them, always encourage him, given so many chances. He is pretty much the exact opposite of Louise. He is a freeloader who got everything handed to him on a silver platter while Louise worked her ass off for everything. You know, the child who could do no wrong. So, of course, that has put an enormous ugly strain on Louise and her brother Mark's relationship. And you see that very early on and quite evidently. And it's to the point where they don't talk to each other unless they have to. And every time they do, they just fight. It's teeth and claws. And this is also where we see one of her big main stresses is being a good mother, being the mother that she wished her own mother would have been to her. She mainly just wants to be the version of her mother that was always honest and upfront about everything, rather than if something was uncomfortable or something bad happened, her mother shut it out. They didn't talk about it and acted like it never existed. They never dealt with it. However, she's experiencing that absolute honesty can hurt just as much as lying or avoiding the matter altogether. And that is the first 100 pages. I'm going to go read 100 more and I will be back. So, 200 pages in. As I said before, Louise and Mark's relationship was evidently, from the get-go, just very strained. Well, now it's getting a lot worse. They're just being extremely petty and hurtful towards each other through this whole process. Because pretty much Louise doesn't trust Mark with anything. She thinks that he will ruin the funeral if he is given the chance to take care of it and do it himself. But come to find out, Mark did a fantastic job with the funeral. It was great. Everybody loved it. It was a beautiful service. And this is where Louise starts waking up a little bit to her brother, that he's not a total screw up, a failure. He can do things right. And she tries to be the better person and tells them straight up that the service was beautiful and he did a great job. And you're like, oh, great. So maybe they can start repairing their relationship. There's hope for that. Yeah, well, that is until they go into the wake. They go to their Aunt Honey's house. Well, Louise's cousin's husband is the lawyer for their parents. So Mark is he's been nagging and up Brody, the lawyer's ass about what does he get from his parents? What is the inheritance? He wants. No. He wants everything, wants all the money. So focused on getting money. They go in and the lawyer tells them, well, since your brother can't wait, let's just go ahead and get this over with. So they do. And it turns out that because of the order of events of how their parents died, instead of Louise getting everything like her father stated in his will, Mark is the person that now gets everything, the house, everything in it, except Louise's mother left her entire art collection. That means anything she's ever made, she left to Louise, which means paintings and the hundreds and hundreds of puppets in that house she gets. So you can imagine that Louise is infuriated because once again her mother chooses Mark over her, and she doesn't understand why. She doesn't understand why her mother and Mark had such a better relationship than her and her mother had. So she feels betrayed once again. And of course, as you can imagine, Mark is over the moon and he's being extremely petty over it all, to the point where there are childhood stuffies in Louise's room and she wants to take them back to San Francisco to give to her child. And he said, those are mine. You had to pay for those. What? So it gets pretty bad. However, Louise sees this as an advantage. She turns this into an advantage for her. She said, you're not going to fucking win this time, Mark. You know why? Because since Mom left all the artwork to me, that means all her puppets, and the house is full of puppets. And it could take me weeks. It could take me years to go through all that stuff. So you're not going to sell the house. You're not going to get any money, and I'm going to fucking win this time. Now, Aunt Honey and the rest of her family doesn't want the house to be sold. So her Aunt Honey would be happy about that. There's other parts of the family that doesn't really give a shit. They're happy to help sell the house. One of the cousins is a realtor and trying to help them out. However, during this plan, she gets a horrifying encounter with one of her mom's creations that should not be happening. Shit starts turning alive. And these things start attacking her. And so after this horrifying experience, she said, you know, it's not fucking worth it. It's all yours. I'm done. I'm going back home to my daughter. I never want to see and talk to you again. I'm done. I'm fucking done. And she just sees this as, you know what, this is stupid. This is stupid to fight over. It's stupid to be here. I'm going home. Bye-bye. Well, the moment she goes to leave, she's packed. Mark comes banging on the hotel window, gets her outside, and their cousin, who is the realtor, says, stay here. We're going to sell the house. You're getting 50-50, even though Mark keeps on demanding that she's going to get 25%, but the cousin makes him promise to give her 50-50, as it should be. And so they snag her in with, just think of how this will help out your daughter's future. So of course she's going to stay. Now at this point, this is where things start ramping up with the house. And after their cousin comes through the house, she does a walkthrough so she knows what she's dealing with whenever she puts it on the market. She straight up says, no, there's some bad shit in your house. I don't like it. It's haunted. Fix it, and then we can sell your house. And of course, Louise thinks it's ridiculous. Their house isn't haunted. Mark thinks their parents are still in the house and they need to somehow release them and let them know they will be okay and release them into the light and be at peace. Louise goes on with this charade as she sees in her head. She's like, whatever to get you to sell the house, I'll do. Well, like I said, things start ramping up, and soon enough, they're both scared of the house. And at this point, this really seems more about focusing in on the family and digging into their past and bringing out all of the weird, unspoken things that needed to come to the surface that they all tried to bury years and years ago. So this is more focusing on the parents' dirty secrets rather than the haunting of the house. The haunting of the house right now is a bit secondary. So we'll see how this goes. Okay. Shit is escalating. And it is tapping into my nightmares and bringing them out. This book is reminding me very much so of the horror movie from a long time ago I watched when I was a child, Puppet Master. And the visceralness is upon me, and I've stumbled upon a twist that I didn't fully see coming. Grady was leaving little subtle crumbs to tickle your brain, to let you know in a whisper that something is coming and it's not good. Something was wrong and it concerns Louise. And now that the plot has been revealed, it is here. It is, what a twist! And the twist involves, of course, wouldn't you guess it, one of her mom's hundreds and hundreds of puppets. And it's about one in particular, and I'm trying to make this spoiler free and not give so much away. And it is wreaking havoc. So through this plot twist reveal, we find out about a memory that Louise, like her mother, chose to forget. She suppressed it. It was about not only her, but what Louise tried to do to Mark. Thankfully, he survived. And when this is brought up, Mark said, you really don't remember? You don't understand why I was always such pretty much a jerk to you? And even when he talked about this memory, she wouldn't believe it. She refused to believe it. It wasn't her. The classic move of her mother. Not only do we find out that the memory is actually true. We also get Mark's explanation of why he dropped out of college. This was always Louise's biggest mysteries to her. Why did her brother pretty much force, in her mind, she saw that he forced her parents to pay for the full tuition of BU college, and then not even a year later, less than a year, he drops out completely. So now this is the point in the book where he reveals why he dropped out. And it is all due to the same puppet that is connected to Louise. This puppet wrecked Mark's life to the point where he doesn't even know if maybe he killed a couple people, his classmates, unintentionally so, and it haunts him even to this day. And not only that, but at this point, Mark is in the hospital because him and Louise were at the house and they get attacked. Not only do they get attacked and Mark gets used, but they get used and attacked by the one particular puppet. And during all this, Louise is trying to survive. She ends up cutting off her brother's arm. And during all this, we also have Mark's imaginary vicious dog whenever he was little, because his mom didn't want to have to deal with death. She didn't want to get a dog and then something happened to him and then explain death and deal with that emotional trauma for her kids and herself. So Mark, when he was younger, made up a dog that had like blue fur, 6 legs, fangs, went everywhere with them, and it ends up attacking Louise. But they managed to escape the house, but Louise is okay after she's getting bashed and hammered in. It was very intense. And it made my skin crawl. I was right there with the characters. It definitely felt like within the scenes, my breathing, my heart rate was going. I was getting scared. It was, the surprises here and there. It definitely got me going. It definitely worked. So now that roller coaster is over with, because my God, that was a lot. I felt like I just went through a marathon, got beaten, battered, and dragged through the mud and just flung up against the wall. And I'm laying there crumpled, exhausted. Okay, so the relationship is at this point somewhat repaired and they are better now that everything is out in the open. Louise understands why he was a dick. And not only did they manage to escape the house, but they managed to incinerate that puppet. And so after the incineration, after Louise went back to the house to incinerate the puppet while Mark is in the hospital bed, the house feels empty. There is no presence, as they say. There's no presence, no one in the rooms, nothing in the attic, no weight of the past, no sense of her mom and dad. It felt like someone had picked it up, shaken out all the people and all the history and left it empty. Not a house anymore, but a series of boxes connected by wall-to-wall carpeting with nothing left inside. Their house didn't feel haunted anymore. And so after all of this, it's done. The villain is gone and dead, and Louise is going to be able to go back home to her daughter, finally, like she has been wanting to ever since this started. However, I'm going to say that shit didn't work because still have this much left to go, okay? This is 300. I have 110 pages left to go. So what more is there to talk about? I'll be back. Oh my God. I thought this was over. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm done. I've finished the book. I finished the last 110 pages. Like I thought, and like it was pretty obvious. The villain is back. And I needed a break. So I took a day and a half from this book because whenever I started reading again, reading through it, I said, why? we were done. Why are we prolonging this? And I don't want to read anymore. It's too exhausting. I felt like I was Louise getting beaten up and was done with this shit. But I'm glad I kept reading because there was one mystery that was not revealed or uncovered, and that was they kept on mentioning this guy named Freddie. So Freddie was Louise's uncle. Freddie died young as a child, and his mother couldn't handle it. And that's where her mother got the habit of not dealing with anything bad, anything comfortable, especially death. They don't talk about it. It never existed. It never happened. It's like the person never really happened either. So they kept on mentioning Freddie and how nobody really talked about his death, how nobody really talked about him afterwards. He just died young, and that was that of Lockjaw. Okay, well, now on to the start of the last 110 pages. After Mark is out of the hospital, she stays with him for about 2 weeks to help him, and then she goes back home. She, everything is done. I can go home to my daughter. Well, the moment she steps in to Poppy's bedroom, her daughter's, well, you know it, that fucking evil puppet is there. And now the puppet has her daughter. Her daughter is now being taken over by this puppet, and she is running amok, being mischievous and reckless and just wreaking havoc. She almost burned down the kitchen. She is hurting herself with a knife. And so, as you can imagine, Louise is just, she doesn't know what to do. She's just trying to get this puppet away from her daughter now. And after she tells Mark, Mark calls back and he says, "You need to come home now. We can only deal with this here. This is where it stems from. We have to come back home." She doesn't want to, but she does. Well, they go back, and her Aunt Gail, I guess, is a type of a exorcist. Her daughter, which is Mercy, the realtor, Louise and Mark's cousin that they've been dealing with, said, "This isn't my first haunted house," that she said in the beginning. And now she said, my mother Gail, she has helped me with a couple houses. So they all go with Aunt Gail to her friend who also deals with performing exorcism on haunted dolls. She is an expert at it. So they go together, they go to this gal's place, and they put Poppy and this puppet in a circle, and then they try to get this demon's name. Because once you have the demon's name, you can exorcise it, right? Okay, so, well, they find out that they're not dealing with a demon, they're dealing with a ghost. And this ghost is that of the 5-year-old Freddie that died, supposedly of Lockjaw. I won't reveal of how he actually died. He is a 5-year-old child spirit who has stuck himself onto this puppet because he doesn't want to leave. He wants to play all day. But throughout time, it has gotten sinister play, and it's gotten cruel and murderous. So they find out what they have to do. They have to find Freddie's body. They have to find his bones and put him to rest. So they go back to the house, and it's not even Poppy anymore. It is Pumpkin, or aka Freddie. Louise comes up with a game of, we're going to play hot and cold. So Freddie can lead them to his body and put him to rest. Well, it's not going to be easy, of course. And a whole another attack comes through, and it is nothing but all the hundreds and hundreds of puppets. They are attacking. Pumpkin is using Poppy. He is the ringleader and is just full on attack onto Mark and Louise. But towards the end, Louise is able to locate Freddie's body. And not only that, Mark's imaginary dog, Spider, comes and helps Louise and fights off all the puppets. And Louise is able to put Freddie to rest. And now she has saved her child. She has rid the world of this awful monstrosity of a puppet. And all is right again. Her and Mark's relationship is no longer strenuous. It isn't terrible. They're no longer fighting or being mean to each other. It's pretty much being repaired, and it is at a pretty good, solid place. towards the end, I cried at the end of this book. They prepared an official ceremonial funeral service for Freddie, and they were in the cemetery, and they laid him to rest next to his parents. And Poppy is happy. She's meeting the rest of her family, running around with her cousins, playing in the graveyard. I thought that was super cute. And they are selling the house, and Mark has been renovating it, and he's really proud of it, and he wants to show it off. He wants to show it off to his sister and his little niece. And of course, Louise doesn't really want to. She's very apprehensive about it, doesn't necessarily want to go back to the house, but she realizes this is important to Mark, so she does it for him. And it turns out Mark has a knack for renovating houses, and he's gonna be working with Mercy, their cousin, the realtor, with other houses, and it's looking bright for Mark. It's looking better. And she's seeing him in a new light, in a really good light. And there's this part, and I'll probably start crying again, like I'm already getting choked up about it, but I wanted to read it. But like I was saying before, I've lost people, so this has resonated with me pretty well. It was the smell of baking. It was the smell of stolen baking. She looked around the bare, cold kitchen and saw that the oven was off, and its digital display flashed 12 to itself over and over again. She felt herself wrapped in the scent of warm butter and hot icing, and she inhaled and let it fill her head. She smelled candy fruit and warm sugar. She smelled yeast. She looked at Mark standing next to her, and he had a strange look on his face, like he was listening to faraway music. He met her eyes. What? He started. You know, Louise said, whenever I used to smell Dad's baking. Here I am getting choked up. Okay. Suck it up. Bring it in. Focus. I always felt like everything was going to be okay. Mark began, and then he just stood there, lost in the smell of their dad's cooking. They heard the toilet flush, and Poppy wandered into the room with Red Rabbit. It smells like cookies, she said. It does, Louise agreed. She didn't know if it was energy, or vibes, or ghosts, or memories, or maybe even her dad sending one final message to the three of them. But it didn't matter. Jesus Christ, am I going to get through this? Maybe I shouldn't read this. Oh, okay, I want to do it. I'm going to suck it up. Oh my God. Okay, where was I? For a little while, for the last time, Mark and Louise stood in the house where they grew up and smelled the scent of their dad's stolen baking in the oven. Finally, Louise said we should go. And after a while, the smell of stolen faded away. Oh. How could you not cry after that? How? Oh, such a beautiful, tender moment. And after this book, I need a break. Oh my God. This was such a good book. I loved it. It was great. It was a roller coaster. It was exhausting, but it was good. It definitely felt like it took a lot out of me. We marked all the boxes on an emotional roller coaster, went through it all. It is one of my favorites I have read thus far, not just this year, but overall of all the books that I've read. And I am sold on this book to where I want to read his other books. This book really played heavily on family dynamics and relationships, and how whenever you avoid uncomfortable things, incidences, death, you start building secrets, and that can really come back to haunt you. It can really bite you in the ass. And it's also about coping mechanisms in order to get through all the uncomfortable and hard trials and tribulations and incidences in our life. How if we invest so much time and energy and lean into these coping mechanisms so much, that the energy that we put in there, it can turn into something pretty ugly and crippling and even life-threatening. I found this as somewhat of a lesson of to be wary and cautious. Be careful about picking certain coping mechanisms, of how they affect you and how they can affect the rest of your family, in order to make that pain, that uncomfortability easier to manage. Anyway, that sums it up. So if you are a fan of the paranormal, if you like to delve into family dynamics and characters, I really think this book, you should give it a try, and it could very well be for you, and you might love it as much as I do. And also let me know in the comments below if you have read this and what are your own thoughts about it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one. Be good, be safe, be kind. Have a wonderful week, month. Bye-bye.